Good morning. Today we are going to explain the reproduction in plants. Reproduction in plants, these are the different steps that we are going to explain it and talk about it. What the meaning of flower, what is the structure of the flower, what are the different parts of the flower, and pollination, and fertilization, and then at last we will explain what is the asexual reproduction in plants. Actually, the reproduction in plants, two different types. One of them is the sexual reproduction, and this is what I'm going to explain today. And the second one is the asexual reproduction. First, what is the structure of the flower in the plant? I mean the typical flower. First, we have to know that the flower is raised from a flowering bud. This flowering bud emerges from the axil of the leaf, known as bract. And the axil may carry a number of flowers, known as the inflorescence. This is the place exactly that the flower will be produced in the plant. But the most important part is the structure of the flower. What is the structure of the flower? And this structure adapted the flower to can make the reproduction in the flowering plant, because the flower is the part in the stem that modified to do the reproduction in flowering plant. That's meaning this is the reproductive system or the reproductive organ in the flowering plant is the flower. This is the most important meaning of the flower. Any flower that's going to make the reproduction must consist of four main walls. The first wall of the flower is called the colored leaves. These colored leaves, each one of them is called sepal. Each one of the green leaves is called sepal. First, we have the pedicle and receptacle, the two parts the flower is going to come from them, and they will carry the four walls of the flower. The first wall of the flower is the calyx. Calyx, its color is green. The outer wall of the flower, the group of it is called calyx, while the single or the just only one leaf is called sepal. Only one leaf is sepal. Group of leaves of sepals will form the calyx, and its color is green. Its main function is protecting the inner parts of the flower. The second part is the colored leaves, these which are taking the pink color. These parts, if we are talking about only one leaf, this is called petal, while the group of these petals are called corolla. So the first wall is the calyx in the form of plural. The second wall is corolla. What about the third wall? The third wall or the fourth wall are the reproductive organ in the flowering plant or in the flower. One of them is the androecium. Androecium is the male organ of the flower, the group of it. Group of the leaves are called androecium, while each one is called stamen. Each one is called stamen. The stamen consists of stick called anther, called filament, This is the filament, small structure like the long stick, and carries above it is the anther. That's meaning anther and filament, both of them forming the stamen, and the group of stamen will form the androecium. Stamen and androecium are the male organ of the flower. The last whorl is the genetium. Genetium, this is the plural, while the single leaf of it is called carpel. So the group of carpel will form genetium. Any genetium consists of three main parts. The first part is the ovary, or up to down, stigma, style, and ovary. And inside the ovary, we'll find the ovule. So these are the four whorls of the flower. Again, what are the names? Calyx, corolla, Untitled, Genetium. In the case of the plural, but in the case of the single, it will be sepal, petal, stamen, and carpel. These are the function of the calyx. We explain it, and the Untitled. What about the Untitled? I said there is structure like stick called the filament. The Untitled has a structure like stick called filament, carries the anther. The anther consists of four chambers. They are containing grains like the dust called the pollen grain. These four sacs are called pollen chambers. Each pollen chamber is containing the pollen grains. When this anther reaches to the mature state, it cuts vertically, and then the pollen grains will spread in the air. This is everything about the Untitled. And you'll find more than one in the flower. And if the flower is containing Untitled only, this will be a male flower. While in the case of Genetium, it is the innermost whorl of the flower. We explained it before. Each leaf of it, I mean the single of the Genetium, is called carpel. Each carpel, the same like flask shaped, formed of, there is a bulge in the first. This bulge is called ovary, and then connected with the tube. This tube is called the style, and then ended with the opening in the top is called stigma. This is the female organ of the flower. And if the flower is containing the female organ only, without male organ, it will be female flower. And the third type of the flower, beside the male flower and the female flower, is the bisexual flower, or hermaphrodite. Bisexual or hermaphrodite flower, this is the flower that's containing male organ, I mean the stamen, and the female organ, I mean the carpel, or Untitled and Genetium, such as the Petunia and wallflower. Petunia and wallflower are examples of the bisexual flower. While the male flower, we have palm trees, maize, and pumpkins. Three different examples about the flower that's containing stamen only, without containing the carpel or Genetium. While the flower, which is female flower, will contain also the female organ only, Genetium or carpel, such as palm trees and maize and pumpkins also. This is the meaning of the flower, and we explained it before. Now we'll take the first step of taking place of the reproduction in the flowering plant. This first step is the pollination, the structure, and then the pollination. Pollination generally is the process of transferring the pollen grain, which is the male sex cell of the flower, to the stigma, the male organ, just transferring it is called pollination. Transferring of pollen grain from the anther of the flower to the stigma is called pollination. If the pollen grains transfers from the anther to the stigma in the same flower or another flower in the same plant, such as the pearl plant or flax plant, this is called self or auto-pollination. Transferring of pollen grains from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the same flower of the same or another flower of the same type, this is called the self-pollination. While the other type is the mixed pollination, and mixed pollination is transferring of the pollen grain from the anther of the flower to the stigma of another flower on a different plants, such as what's happening in maize and sunflower plant. Transferring of pollen grains, we see here the arrow, transferring the pollen grain from the anther of the flower to the stigma of another flower of the same type. This is the types of pollination. But what are the methods of taking place the pollination? We have different methods for transferring the pollen grain from the anther to the stigma. One of them, pollination by the air. Pollination by the air happens in the flowers that have, number one, hanging anther. Hanging anther. Because when it's cut vertically, the pollen grains will spread directly into the air till reaching to the stigma. And in this case, the stigma must be feathery and sticky, just to catch the pollen grain spread in the air before. And air-pollinated flower will produce a huge and large number of pollen grains to compensate what will be lost in the air. And pollen grain must be light to be easier for carrying it by the air. This is the pollination by the air. The second one is the pollination by the insects. The pollination by the insects, the flower must be colored. Why? To attract the insects to it, such as the bee, and has a plenty of nectar, also to attract the insects that will carry the pollen grain on their buds. In this case, the pollen grain itself will be sticky or having coarse surface just to stick to the insect body. This is the way of pollination by the insects. We have also the artificial pollination. In the case of pollination in these palm trees, the way of pollination in it is the artificial by man is going to transfer, the man will transfer the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. And this is the artificial pollination. The second step is the fertilization. Fertilization is the fusion of the male gamete and the female gamete to form zygote. In this case, the fusion or combination of the nucleus for the pollen grain with the nucleus of the egg cell to form zygote, the first cell, which is produced after the pollination and the fertilization. The pollen grain comes over the surface of the stigma, the first part of the carpel, and then forming a tube. This tube is called pollen tube. This pollen tube is containing a nucleus. This nucleus is containing half the hereditary substance from the male. Then this nucleus will move, generative nucleus will move inside the pollen tube till reaching to which is called microbial, and this microbial till reaching to the micropyle, the nucleus will enter into the ovum to find the female nucleus, and then combination with it to form the zygote. This is the way exactly to form the fertilization. The zygote, which is formed from the fertilization, grows several times to form embryo. This embryo will grow inside the seed, but the ovary itself will change into fruits. That's meaning the embryo will be inside the seed, and the ovary itself will change into fruits. Sometimes the fertilization, the ovary is containing more than one ovules. If it contains more than one ovules, that's meaning it forms a fruit. Inside this fruit, I will find many seeds inside it, such as the beans and peas. In beans and peas, the ovary is containing more than one ovule. That's meaning the fertilization will take to form more than one seed. So I'll find more than one seed inside the fruit. The second one is the asexual reproduction in the flowering plant. There are two types of reproduction: vegetatively, I said before, natural vegetative reproduction, and artificial vegetative reproduction. The natural vegetative reproduction, this type of plant, produced by many ways, like reproduction by rhizomes of shoots, corms, tubers, and bulbs. Example for the reproduction by tuber. What is the tuber? It is the swollen part from a horizontal root or terrestrial stem, which contains growing buds, and it is used for vegetative reproduction. For the vegetative reproduction, we have different types. Asexual reproduction flowering plant, number one, natural vegetative reproduction. If it's going to form a tuber root-like, I'm talking about the sweet potatoes, or underground stem like potatoes. In the case of the natural vegetative reproduction by tuber, I'm thinking about sweet potatoes. The reproduction is taking place by a part of the root. Potatoes only a part of the underground stem. This is the first type. The second type in the sexual reproduction plant, on cultivation of slice of potatoes contains bud. Some buds will grow again, forming root system, and the other part will form the shoot system. After a while, it will form the old parts of the plant. This is from a slice only from the plant. The second one, reproduction by cutting. By cutting, the cut is the part of fruit or a stem or a leaf. Part of a stem, part of a root, part of a leaf, which is taken from the plant for the purpose of reproduction. And this one is more common for the cut to be branch, which is carrying more than one bud or carries many buds. Reproduction by cutting, this takes place in the case of grapes, roses, sugar cane, different plants. The way of reproduction in it is asexual reproduction by cutting. The cutted part should leave a bud or more appear above the soil surface. This bud, the cut part, will bury it again into the soil under the soil surface to grow, forming new plant. Another one is the reproduction by grafting. Grafting is a type of asexual reproduction. A part of the plant is selected which is containing more than one bud. This part is known sign. To be bought, this part will be put over another branch of the same kind of the plant called stock. And then by the sign or the stock or by graft, this will form, this part which is cut will form a new plant. Grafting by attachment, where the sign is attached to the stock directly like this, and this is in the case of the mango tree. Or grafting by wedge, and in the case of wedge, where the sign in this case will be like pencil shape. The sign will be like the pencil shape, and this one will insert inside the stalk into a cleft in the stalk, and this is take place in the case of the large tree. Okay, these are the different methods of grafting. The last one is the tissue culture. Tissue culture, this is dividing the small part, or the small part of the plant will taken, and this part will grow again and again, forming the new plant. The scientists have developed the process of multiplying of a small part. I will take small part of the plant and then putting it in nutrients and hormones, suitable medium for growing, to form a new plant that will grow normally. These are the different steps for growing the plant by the artificial vegetative production. I mean tissue culture, small parts separated and then placed into nutritive medium, contains nutrients and hormones, and then small new plant starts to grow till reaching to a certain size. Then taking this plant and put it in the soil, it will grow, forming new plant. And by this one, we already finished now all the reproduction in the flowering plant. Wish that everyone understand the lesson, and thank you.